Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell, and welcome to Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, each week we go live with a discussion with a current pro to discuss their techniques, ideas, and approaches in the film industry. This week we're talking to Tony Vellante, and he's worked on Fosse Verdon, Hamilton, Dirty Money, Going Clear, and so much more. Welcome to the show, Tony.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess my first question is, I noticed that you've done fiction films and you've also done documentaries.
Mm.
Um, how because I've always seen re-recording, mixing, or sound designing, all that work on documentaries seem to be much tougher because you're not getting pristine audio all the time. So, what
True.
are some of the things you do to that makes a, that would help make a documentary stand out in terms of re-recording, mixing, or sound design?
Yeah, great question. Documentaries years ago used to be a lot different than they are now. They're almost want the same. Some of them have the same production value as feature films now, and they add all kinds of graphics and special effects um, and as you said, the audio sometimes can be from various sources. So yeah, it makes it challenging. Um, because you have such a wide variety of audio sources from archival sounds, newsreels to recording in not so optimum situations. Um, some so it's a wide variety of situations. Um, Luckily, the way the technology is advanced, there's a lot of great noise reducing and cleanup tools and to undistort, de-reverb, de-noise. All these tools now are at our fingertips with some of the new plugins that have come out in the past few years, and that's really helped us to have these tools for some of the challenging sound work that is in documentaries. But a lot of that same stuff relates over and crosses over into the feature film mixing as well. um, it's I'd say we use all the same tools. It's just that not only is the noise reducing and cleanup of not so great recorded sound in the documentary world, but even from an editorial standpoint, um, there's what we call Frankenbites in the documentary world, and um, the editing is much more difficult, I think, in a documentary than in a feature film where you've got a script and the actors are saying what they're supposed to be saying, and it's a little bit easier from an editorial standpoint. So not only is it hard from a mixing standpoint with the challenging recordings, but it's also tricky from an editorial standpoint.
How because you mentioned Frankenbiting, and
Mhm.
in some situations the little snippets of dialogue that are utilized to build the
A
voice or the
sentence.
line of dialogue
Yeah,
might come from the same scene, so the backgrounds will be somewhat similar and a little easier to work at, but in some extreme cases it might be
yeah,
pulling from other moments. So
absolutely.
how would you work with the dialogue editor or your other team to make this as sound as normal, I guess you could say, as possible?
Yeah, well, the dialogue editors, it's as I said, it's a challenge, putting together these Frankenbites, and there's numerous techniques and tools to use to try to help. But yeah, you could have an interview um, that they're using as a voiceover, so it's not on camera anymore, so you're able
Mhm.
to put together a couple of different sentences. But they, as you said, they could be from different locations. So maybe one was recorded in an echoey, reverby space, and another one was not. And so now you always have to, unfortunately, match the worst sounding audio. It's very rare that you can clean up the bad audio and make it sound as good as the good audio. You usually have to go the other direction and dumb down, as we say, the good audio, and then try to raise the quality of the bad audio and meet in the middle someplace.
Yeah.
So maybe you need to add some reverb or echo to the dry sounding voice as you're trying to take some away from the echoey sounding voice, and then equalizing them to sound the same. But a lot of it, editorial wise, is in the timing, the pacing. I find that's almost more important than the matching of the quality. Sometimes it's just, if the person was talking really fast in one part of the sentence, and then it's very slow in this other part that you're trying to put in, just trying to match that timing seems to help a lot. So the editors know this stuff, and when they deliver the material to me, in the old days, as you know, probably the line was drawn in the sand much clearer between editorial and mixing.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get materials delivered to me, and it was basically, because I started in the re-recording world, not from the editorial world. So the editors would deliver me the material, and I would just mix. And if we needed to work on a Frankenbite or a re-edit something, it would go back to the editors. They would re-deliver the material to me, and I would just mix. I very, very rarely would do any editing. But as technology progressed, and editors could mix and mixers could edit, that line in the sand got kind of got wiped out. So I get the material now from the editors, and it's very well edited. But even when I get it and I'm mixing, I can certainly now, a lot more than I used to, get in there and tweak the edits myself. And if I want to fiddle with the pacing a little bit, I can just go ahead and do it. If I want to pitch something up and down, or to help match the intonation, I can do all that stuff. So it's become more of a re-recording mixer is not only a mixer anymore these days.
Yeah. Now I want to touch on something you mentioned there, which is that you find that the pacing and the sort of delivery, if that works, if that's really done well, it sort of sells it. Do you find that people are more forgiving of bad audio if the pacing and the flow is correct for the moment?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole trick, is to not make something obviously stand out and take you out of the moment. So whatever that is, whether it's the pacing or the intonation, all those things are helpful. It's not just any one thing, really. It's a combination of all those things: pacing, intonation, equalization. A lot of times you can only go so far, and then we'll use or I'll use what I like to call distraction techniques. You throw a car by. We joke about it all the time. Well, let's just throw a car by. Between the transition from this one audio to the other, kind of cover the bad spot. Or you add some background in there. That's always a big part of it too. Is the backgrounds change between these different recordings. So if you can maybe throw in some background, or music is always a great thing. Music covers a lot of issues. All those things help.
I just picture two people in a room, and all of a sudden a car just passes right by them sound-wise.
Yeah, sometimes you can't do too much, but I've had to put together things where the person was recorded in a sit-down interview, and then they wanted to add a line that was recorded while they were driving in a car. So I had to reduce the car tone to try to get it to match as possible. All kinds of crazy things, but
you did so this, or I guess last year now, but 2020 was a crazy year, and one of the things Disney did was release Hamilton early. and
Right.
you were a part of that. So what were some of the challenges of, I guess, taking this very loved
Mhm.
musical and bringing it to the screen, especially since it was a stage play, like shot as a
Yeah.
stage play?
Well, um, it was one of the more unique projects I've ever worked on.
Mhm.
And generally, we have these Pro Tools templates that now the technology has advanced so far that I have a huge template set up that can kind of accommodate any kind of project. Whether it's a documentary, I can switch between documentary setup to a feature film setup pretty quickly. But then along comes a job like Hamilton, and you just kind of throw all that out the window. It's like, okay, this is a very unique job. It's got literally, hundreds and hundreds of microphones going on simultaneously, and um, it's basically a huge music mix. So we had to build a template from scratch that it would accommodate this particular recording. And the way I approached it was I didn't want. I mean, on the surface, you could think, okay, this is like a live recording, so
Mhm.
it could be quite easy. You once you get the band balanced, they're gonna stay balanced throughout because it's the same pieces throughout the whole thing. The drummer's not changing, the guitar player is playing the same instrument. The strings are the same, so you could get everything kind of set. You get everything balanced and think, oh yeah, this is going to play nice, and you get the voices and where they should be, and it would play like a good representation of the show.
Mhm.
But the way it was approached filming wise, it was obvious that it needed to be more than just like a representation of a live performance. Because they had these pickups of close-ups, the camera right up on the stage and moving around with different angles, and so in watching it, I wanted to enhance all that, just very similar to what we do in most films. We just I try to enhance what I'm seeing visually, and so it became much more of a moving, breathing kind of mix where, depending on what was going on stage and the style that any particular song was done in, I would try to uh, stylistically adjust the mix to match what we were seeing. Um, some of the songs are more traditional Broadway showish type songs, and were filmed that way. And then so the mix tends to be more traditional. But then there was other songs where they were right up on stage, and it almost looks like a music video or a feature film or something,
Mhm.
and then it allowed me to be more playful with the sound. I could get more creative with it and do things with the surrounds and move panning around and be a lot more expressive with the sound as a instead of just being a capture of a live recording. So
Mhm.
it became much more dynamic, and that's what really I enjoyed working on that film tremendously, because um, it was many small types and styles within this big long show.
Mhm.
And so, as I said, we just didn't kind of set it and forget it. We Every song we kind of tried, at least I tried to match the dynamic of that song and change things up slightly so that it kept this it kept it moving, and kept each song, there was maybe a new little piece of ear candy that would come out, for the listener. um, so you get little surprises as it went along throughout the show.
Um, so I have a friend who's a big fan of Hamilton,
Hmm.
and one of his frustrations when he would see it live is that they were rapping so fast in some cases that he couldn't sort of keep up
Yeah.
or make out what they were saying. So what were some of the challenges in terms of making sure, because that's one of his things that he loved about the show,
Yeah.
like watching it, is he's like, oh, now I know exactly what
Yeah.
they're saying. So what were some of the challenges of making sure the audience could actually hear
Well,
or
I think,
understand?
yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about watching it in the film version is that I think people will get to be able to understand the words and better than in a live performance. I saw it live and it was excellent. But yeah, in a live performance with a live mix and them moving around, there's no way to catch every little phrase that you can do as us in post production. If there was a line that went by that, wow, that was a little hard to understand. Now we can in post production, I can EQ that line. I can push the syllables up. I mean, we were doing things like that. Like pushing words and syllables and vowels just to make things more clear. And obviously, you can't do that in a live performance. So that was a huge benefit, I think, from being able to do this. It really wasn't so much challenging. I mean, the recordings were great. It was just a lot of work. Just going through, very time consuming, but making sure that all the words were as clear as they could possibly be. The other thing I did a lot was I did a lot of panning. This is something that kind of gets discussed early on, and once you go down that rabbit hole, you kind of get stuck there. So
And
I
what do you
ended
mean
up
by panning? Like just like I
so
understand it's going to be directing the speakers, but why would you do that in this case?
well. I mixed it initially for the big screen, so we were mixing it in a theater. So I wanted to follow the actors on stage, so that if one of the actors is stage left and the other one's far stage right, wanted to put their voices stage left and stage right. We just didn't set all the voices straight up the middle or just kind of mush them around. If the background singers were, if the ladies were on the left and all of a sudden they ran across the stage and now they're on the right, we followed all, I went through and followed all that movement with the backgrounds with each principal singer, so that the stage became this living live thing. And I think that also adds to the clarity that you're talking about. Not only just pushing things up level wise or EQ wise to get clarity, panning helps a lot too, and so that all the voices aren't on top of one another and gets kind of murky. If I can separate them a little bit on stage and this voice is over here, this voice is over there, you can understand the voices better.
Was there a frustration then that most people are going to see this on their regular old television? And
No, what we ended up doing was Rob Fernandez ended up taking over the mix because I was unavailable when they pushed up the schedule to during I guess it was July 4th weekend when it came out. So I was unavailable, but Rob took over and did a near field mix of this where some of the panning we would just narrow it in a little bit so that it wasn't as drastic as it was on the big screen. Because that's a good point. You don't want if you're looking at it on your laptop, you want there to be a little bit more focus. So we had to do, Rob had to make some adjustments for the smaller screen.
now you've worked on so many amazing things. Like I think about Going Clear, which is one of my wife's favorite docs. I think about Fosse Verdon.
Oh yeah.
What would you say was one of your most challenging scenes to work on? And what was it that made it challenging in your career?
Well, Fosse Verdon comes to mind right off the bat as a challenging scene. There was, I think it might have been, I'm not sure what episode it was. It was early on when the two of them meet for the first time in a dance studio. It's just the two of them, and it's um, so always the most challenging scenes usually are the scenes where it's supposed to be quiet and it's just some dialogue going on, and you don't have a lot of help from music or some other background to help absorb some of the nuances that might be causing issues. So this was a tricky scene because they're inside of a dance studio, large echoey space, and there's lots of wide shots. So we had to use the radio mics, and they're walking around in big dance boots and shoes, and moving around and talking while they're moving, and it's a long scene. It's one of the more important scenes in the show, and so a scene like that is really challenging to get. I think for probably everybody from an editorial point of view, shooting it, everything. Those are tricky scenes, but it came out great.
Are you a fan of Broadway? Because you've seen to Hamilton, Fosse versus Verdon.
No, I wouldn't call myself a fan of Broadway, but I came from the music background. Like my early years in the business were music recording and music mixing, and did that for many, many years. And so I do enjoy working on a lot of music driven either documentaries or films, like Nina Simone. I've done a number of music type films, and I feel very comfortable in that world, mixing music from scratch if I have to.
Starting in music, what made you transition into film?
Good question. Well, I know exactly when I started in film because it's when my daughter was born. So, which was 27 years ago. So, that's what was sort of the driving force. It's like, okay, I'm going to have a family. Maybe I want some more regular hours, quote unquote, which I thought, and they are pretty much, but the music world, tended to be not your normal 9 to 5 job. So I thought, well, if I get into post-production, maybe that will be a little bit more normal hours and can spend time with the family more. It kind of did that. I mean, I still do crazy hours in post-production, but the thing with post-production is there's usually some kind of schedule and some end game, like, okay, it's going to go on the air at this certain time, so you have to be done by then. So even though there are some crazy schedules, it is a little bit more regular. So that was the driving force, really. And ever since then, maybe the first, I still do music every now and then, but when I first transitioned over to post-production, I probably still would get requests and do some record work as well. But now, at this point, the post-production has taken over.
Now 100%. We know about your work in film, but is there any particular bands that stand out from your music work?
Well, I go way back to when punk music was big back in the 80s. And I did some work with a band called Mission of Burma, which I don't know if anyone listening to this will know who that band is, but they were one of the premier sort of punk bands that came out of Boston, which is where I was working at the time. But what's what's kind of interesting, I guess, and I just thought of this just now. You know, as widely diverse as my film clients are, from documentary filmmakers to independent filmmakers to blockbuster filmmakers, um, the records and stuff I worked on was kind of the same. Like I did work with a lot of punk bands and independent bands, but then I ended up working with Donald Fagen and Roger Daltrey and these, you know, iconic people as well, and everything in between. So I think having a diverse client base is a good thing.
Now you come across very calm. Were you a part of the
That's good.
punk scene? Were you a part of the punk scene back then, or?
Well, I mean, way back, I started. I'm a drummer, so I was in a punk band myself back in the day, and then there was a record company out of Boston called Ace of Hearts that was run by this guy Rick Hart, and he had a really wonderful independent punk record label, and I worked on a lot of his stuff, but it was all really always done to the highest level of quality, which was great. Even though it was punk music, we took it very seriously.
Now, I have one last question that I've been asking everyone I interview for Filmmaker U, and that is, because we're in this crazy pandemic right now, you know, a lot of people have been watching streaming services and catching up on their streaming service viewing, I guess you could say.
Me too.
Is there something you saw during the pandemic that you're like, everyone should check that out?
Well, I got it. Just recently got into this show. I know it's been out for a while, but Peaky Blinders. I just finally finished the last episode the last week, but I really enjoyed that series on all aspects of it. I just thought the acting was great, and the way it was shot and the sound of it was fantastic too. But you know, the show I worked on during the pandemic called I Know This Much Is True, which is on HBO Max now. I highly recommend people to check that out. 6 episodes. Mark Ruffalo won the Emmy for his acting, for acting two parts. He plays twins. But it's a tremendous piece of work and worth checking out.
Well, thank you so much for letting us interview.
Thank you, Gordon.
Well, have a good weekend.
Yeah, same.
All right.